Welcome back, everyone, to the Moms Like Me podcast powered by Support Now. I am pumped. I've got a fun Monday ahead of me here, more specifically because of my guest here today. As everyone knows, I love this podcast so much. I get to meet the most incredible women, the most inspiring moms. But what's really unique about our guest today is we have a lot of personal things in common, at least professionally. Entrepreneurs, go-getters, multiple children. And I'm always fascinated to learn more about how moms balance it all, seemingly with so much grace. But my guest here today is so honest and raw in the ways that she's juggling both being a podcast host herself, a business coach, a CEO, an entrepreneur. I mean, she really does it all. So I'm very excited to introduce Alana Kafetz to our podcast today, who is going to be sharing really not just about her life being a medical mom, but really all the hats that she wears in her life. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
In 30 minutes or less.
In 30 minutes or less, which I think we're already going to break that rule.
Jordan, thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited. Thank you for the opportunity to talk on this topic, which is obviously, part of my fight song as a human being on planet Earth. So let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So, again, there's so many layers to your story. And again, you're so impressive on your own. You don't need to have like any additional thing to add to your resume. But I am curious, one of the things I think that's often missed about medical moms or that we overlook is that no one chooses to be a medical mom. No one chooses and says, this is what I want, right? It's something that happens quite randomly. But in order to give our listeners a little bit more context, I'd love you to explain, like, where were you before you had Henry, before you had your third, because you have 4 children? Kind of what all were you doing? And then describe that moment where you realized, okay, life was now going to be looking a little bit more different than it had previously.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll give you some context. My name is Alana Kavitz. I'm based in Toronto, Canada. I'm a business content creator, entrepreneur, podcast host, and mom of 4. And thank you for the beautiful introduction. Yeah, it's interesting. When I go back, my son Henry has an ultra rare genetic disorder. It's called Myhre syndrome. You can look it up, MYHRE syndrome. And if you're a mom like me who has a kiddo with a rare genetic disorder, then you've sat in hospital and doctors' rooms where people Google your kid's condition in front of you. So that's part of the identities. People really don't know anything until you are the expert and the advocate for your kiddo. And yeah, I was pregnant with him. He was born in 2020, the height of COVID. And I found out in 2019 that we were pregnant and expecting him. I had 2 kiddos. I was just like this regular mom, like, living my life and building a brand for myself all about motherhood, which is sort of the fight song I was leaning into pretty hard. I had a day job, but this was sort of my side hustle. And right before I got pregnant, I went all in on my side hustle and left my full-time career. It was a really interesting moment because all these sort of identities converged where I was like this entrepreneur and I was like living and breathing, over delivering for like the mommy ecosystem. Really didn't want people to be alone, fighting loneliness. I thought that was the hardest thing was like motherhood. I thought being a mom was so hard. And then that identity shift really happened for me after I'd had Henry. We had no idea anything was wrong with him. His echocardiograms, my ultrasounds, like no clue at all. We did every panel genetic test available to us. And retrospectively, would I made a different decision? I have no idea. I wasn't presented with that conundrum. But when we did find out Henry had an ultra-rare genetic disorder was actually many months into his life. We didn't know at birth. We didn't know for the first 6 months. We didn't know for the first 9 months. And it was through a variety of medical interventions where we discovered he had a massive heart condition that we came to his genetic diagnosis, which I came later to understand that that's a very regular, like known trajectory is like you sort of come to the genetic diagnosis through something else. So yeah, like being a regular mom who's like just the cool mom to becoming this like super medicalized mommy is like probably the biggest difference, obviously, that happened between previously being a med mom and not being a med mom. I had all these other elements of my identity I was sort of building that were super important to me and continue to be. And then I had this like new hat and this new fight, which obviously destroyed me, right? Like it was grief. It was a new identity I wasn't prepared for. As you said, I didn't sign up for this, right? Nobody signs up for this. And then you're given it, right? And it's given to you in a way that like you have 2 ways you can show up, right? This can be your entire identity, right? Being a medicalized mom, which is totally cool. And that's a lot of people's entire life. They have no choice, right? A lot of people's kids are super sick. They have no choice but to never work again and to spend all of their time being their child's primary caregiver. And for me, my situation is a little bit different. So it's one of my many identities is being a med mom.
Right. I'm curious, I want to go back a little bit. What were the behaviors or symptoms that Henry presented that made you think, okay, there's something different here?
Yeah. So remember, it's height of COVID. He was born July 2020. So in November of 2020, we went for just a regular checkup. And my pediatrician at the time had heard a really loud heart murmur. She's like, this is a really loud murmur. We probably should see a cardiologist. And those words coming out of her mouth, I'm like, murmur? Cardiologist? I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you got to go like now. So within 2 weeks, we had an appointment at a cardiologist where the cardiologist was taking his sweet ass time on an echocardiogram, looking at my kiddo, an ultrasound machine. And he was saying no words, and he's like, "You gotta go to Sick Kids Hospital immediately." So my son was 4.5 months old. I was like, "What do you mean I have to go to—" I was in tears. I was, like, crying my eyes out. "What do you mean?" It's like this beacon of medical hospital in Canada is called Sick Kids Hospital. It's known around the world. It's, like, probably similar to, like, the CHOP or
Hmm.
Boston's Children, something like that. It's, like, very, very prestigious, and my husband was in the car, and I remember calling him saying, "We have to go to Sick Kids right now." So we went through emergency, and they're like, "Okay, the cardiology team is ready for you." I was like, "What the hell?" I had no idea what was happening because I thought we are just going for a regular, like, 4-month checkup, then, okay,
Yeah.
maybe there's something cardiovascular. And Henry didn't really look like my other kids. He had like, a couple things that were like, "Who do you look like?" I remember, like, I have an early video of me taking video of him because I was already making content. I was like, "Who the hell do you look like, man?" Because my other 2 kids really resembled each other. I'm like, "You're an anomaly. I don't really understand." So there was a couple things like that. Also, in the early days, like, I always had breastfeeding issues with all my kiddos, but he was, like, incredibly challenging. I was like, "This is my 3rd kid. It shouldn't be this hard." And I remember having to be, like, extremely precise, and the precision had to be like this or like that. And he would
Right.
eat and eat and eat and eat. He was never satiated, and then he would vomit, vomit, vomit because he was, like, overeating. So what we didn't know, which came to pass later, was, like, this is all, like, classic cardiovascular issues. His heart was pumping so fast, he was burning calories so quickly that he was starving all the time. So it all came to light much later. But yeah, those were sort of the biggest markers, and then the genetic disorder prognosis came much later in time. But those early days were like, I call them the early days haze. I felt like I was hit by a Mack truck because I was
Right.
like, what the hell is this? And I was learning on the go. And I was like, okay, my other 2 kids, height of COVID, we had no support, no family could see each other. I had to, like, basically hire on somebody full time, which I wasn't prepared for financially, to take care of my other 2 children, where I was then catapulted into this whole hospital identity, which is a whole 'nother layer of the story.
I mean, that's crazy. And I was just about to ask you a question, but you kind of just answered it. Is that typically when people are met with grief and grief defined by, a moment that you didn't anticipate, like a loss of a life that you thought you were going to have that's going to look different. I don't mean it obviously in the sense of an actual loss. And what I have found is that people typically fall into one of two categories. One
Okay.
is an under functioner, meaning they get the news and it's so debilitating that they shut down. They
Yeah.
shut down. And the other is the over functioner, the person that can't stop moving. And so you're describing a time, obviously, we all remember COVID, where it's we were all limited in what we could and couldn't do. So,
Yeah.
how do you kind of describe your grief response, at least at the beginning?
Yeah, I did recede, right? Like, I had no choice. I was walking the halls of Sick Kids Hospital, which ended up being I'll fast forward from, like, us having this moment of, like, you have to go see a cardiologist to being like, "Your son's having heart surgery in 7 days." And then the first surgery was, like, through his back. It's called a thoracotomy, and what they're trying to do is, like, the least amount of intervention. He had 2 heart issues, a PDA ligation, which is where they basically have to, cut off the 2 chambers of the heart. Everyone has this sort of connection, but it's supposed to close within 7 days of birth. Henry's never closed, so the blue blood and the red blood were mixing, and basically they need to go in and snip the 2 ventricles. But another part was that he had a coarctation of his aorta, meaning his aorta, which connects the left and right ventricle, was very narrow, meaning the blood was working really hard. It shouldn't be this, it should be like this. Remember, a baby's heart is the size of their fist, so we're talking about, like, inches, right? Like,
Yeah.
super small. So they did the thoracotomy, and we're like, "Okay, cool, like, we're done," right? We, like, bandaged up, went home, and within a week, they were like, "No, we have to do an additional surgery. He actually requires open heart, open chest." So before he was 6 months old, we went in, and it actually happened to be December 31st, which is his heart anniversary. He went in that day and came out the next day after like, living through an open heart surgery. What they did do with the repair of the coarctation, so they basically cut out the small chunk of heart that's very narrow, and then they reconnect it so it pumps better. So that was like a big lesson. Seeing your kid in the CCU, like people don't even understand what a critical care unit looks like. This is 24/7 round the nurse clock nursing. Your child is never left unsupervised. This is like coming out with like it looked like a hazmat suit basically during COVID. It was insane, and they are basically on a bypass machine, right? The lungs and the heart are being run by something else. Their blood is pumping outside of their body into a machine to keep it going when they're basically dead, right? Like their heart has to stop in order to do the surgery. So that catapulted us into a very long extended stay at SickKids Hospital for the beginning of 2021. So we literally checked in on December 31st for the second admission, and then we didn't leave until March. So we were there for December, January, February, and March was when we got discharged. Yeah.
What were you telling yourself then? I mean, I would imagine it would have been very easy to almost just like slip into some form of depression. You're somewhat separated from your kiddos at home. People already don't know what to make sense of the COVID thing, and here you have this third kiddo that you're just praying every day is going to survive the surgery, survive the
Yeah.
moment. What actually, like, how did you talk to yourself in those moments?
Yeah. So it's 2021 and it was a weird moment, right? Because like we were so isolated and people were not connected, and the only people who go to work were or leave their houses were healthcare professionals. So it was like a weird moment because I when you're bedside with a kiddo, and this is a hard thing for people to understand, it is minute by minute. Every day the doctors come on rounds. There might be a morning rounds and a night rounds, and like whatever the plan is for that 12 hours, that's the plan. So there was no like
Mhm.
forward thinking. There was no weekend, right? I wasn't a nurse coming in for a 12-hour shift. I was a mom 7 days a week bedside with my kiddo, right? And remember, the height of COVID, at the beginning, they were giving vaccines to nurses and to doctors, but they weren't giving vaccines to parents or children living in hospital. So COVID was like this thing floating around. And the nurses kind of weirdly became like my friends and my family, right? You become so enmeshed in their lives and yours that we had like this weird dynamic where like my life was the nurses and the doctors. And those are the people that I socialized with. And it was like the golden lining of this super hard moment, but like almost like grateful to have this network when like there was no network. There was no friends, family, anything, right? And at the same time, I'd built this community online since 2017. And here I am in 2021, like really needing my community. So as you said, like a hyper mover or people who sort of like I call like go into the hole and die, or people who like rally. I rallied hard and it was my self-preservation that I needed to lean on my virtual community. Needed them desperately to feel seen. And I remember reporting, like any mom who's listening, if you had a sick kids like going through a crisis or like a traumatic moment, there's this reporting thing that happens where like you want to report like what's happening, right? Maybe people said it used to be back in the day, people used to like, leave a voicemail. I grew up with a sick parent also. So, my dad, we used to leave like an outgoing message. Hey, today is March 7, 1997. And today this is what happened in hospital, right? And like people would call just like listen to the voicemail to make sure my mom was still alive that day, right? So, and then I remember the advent of emails. Like somebody would send an email to like a mailing list being like, this person is like, this is what the diagnosis is. Now we're drinking this much fluid or whatever it is. So for me, social media became this like reporting mechanism where I was like, okay, guys, we made it through surgery. I'm like walking through sick kids. It was the way I lived. Like it was really my community had me and I felt so had by them. Love messages, text messages. And then it got even more insane where people were like sending me things to the hospital, sending food, sending flowers, right? Sending me Uber gift cards, sending Starbucks gift cards. And what really saved me was this moment where I was talking to these nurses. They're 25 and 26 years old. I'm like, guys, it's McFlurry day. Who wants a McFlurry? That's what I said to the cardiac nurses. And they're like, oh, I'll have one. I'll have one. Sure. Okay. So I was like treating the nurses to McFlurries because they're all kids, right? And I remember going online saying, hey guys, I'm gonna buy to my community of like 15,000 at the time. I was like, I'm gonna buy the nurses some ice cream from McDonald's. Who wants to support me in buying the nurses ice cream? And within 20 minutes, I had like $1,500 cash to buy McFlurry money. And I remember thinking like, "Oh, I'm just gonna donate this to sick kids," because they were like a buck a piece or something at the time. And then McDonald's got a wind of what I was doing, and then McDonald's paid for McFlurries, and then all the money went to Sick Kids Hospital. And it was this moment where I was like, "Oh my god, people wanna support me, right? And they wanna support this." And they're watching this, like chronic car accident of like my life unfolding, where they've known me for the last couple of years as this like happy mom, right? Making funny content and making events for mommies. And then all of a sudden I'm like in this catastrophe. And that was the moment when I decided to pledge to do a huge donation to the hospital. Because the thing where I noticed, and maybe this is resonant with your followers and your listeners, was like even when you're in a pediatric hospital, right? You're there for the kids, right? It's really about the children. But the parents are the ones who are crying in the hallways, right? Parents are the ones who are sleeping in their cars. Parents are the ones who are, meeting in conferences with a bunch of different departments during life and death decisions. And there's really no place in a pediatric hospital for like a parent to fall apart. And that's what I was noticing because I was falling apart, but it was really hard to sit in the waiting room of surgery rooms where parents are like wailing, crying, like animalistic noises, and to focus on your own kiddo. There was no place to fall apart. So I worked with the foundation at our local hospital to put together a plan for like a parent and caregiver lounge that would be this like tranquil place where people would be able to connect with one another. And I'm still on that fundraising vision. We've already raised $265,000,
Amazing.
which was not my money. It was our community doing this McFlurry thing. Bake sales, right? Like making a t-shirt and selling it, like kids' birthday parties. And that's how I found a lot of solace, was being able to do this massive give back. And we call that Project Mom Halo, which is like our B Corp effort. It's still active today, but I actually just got an email from my foundation person telling me that like if I wanted to name an elevator or an escalator or a hospital room, like we could do that at this point. So it was a really amazing story of like, if you're talking about like hyperactively not receding, it was like this, it became my fight song, is that I was this mom living this very public fight because it gave me solace, right? It gave my life meaning. And in return, it gave other people's opportunity to support me without them sending an Uber gift card. Like how many Uber gift cards does a woman need, right?
Right.
And that for me was a big aha moment and really was a turning point in my identity.
I can't get over the fact, by the way, it's so incredible talking about like turning your pain into purpose, like in that moment. I feel like many times it takes people months, if not years, to do that. Whereas you out somehow like through the fog of it all, through the haze of it all, were able to discern that there was an opportunity to go deeper, which I think is so amazing. I also just can't get over the fact that in some ways you had planted the seeds to create all of this through the community you built online without knowing how much you were actually going to need this community later on. I mean, do you reflect on that often?
No, I really relate to this idea that sometimes you build community because you're like wanted to service the community, but then sometimes your community services you, right? And that's really what happened. That moment was this magnitude, like was like an earthquake of support that I wasn't even ready for, and it continued to spiral. Where small businesses were sending, candles to the nurses. I mean, how many nurses, right? There's a really famous underwear company in Canada that's making huge waves called Knix, and Knix at the
Mhm.
time I was friends with the founder, and she's like, "How many like nurses are there on the cardiac ward?" I'm like, "I think let me find out." There was 100 nurses. She sent me 100 $100 gift cards for the nurses. Right? So there was like these magnitude things happening across the community. Was my kid sitting in hospital, like on a feeding tube, recovering from open heart surgery with this really rare thing that happened as a result of the open heart surgery? Yes. Was I sitting there on the floor, like in therapies, trying to get my kiddo to like meet any milestone? Yes. Was I eating hospital food and like desperately trying to like see my other kids? Yes. But this other thing was happening in the background that gave me so much strength and made it like, I don't want to say fun, but it made it meaningful. And it changed like what could have been like, that moment where I could have crawled into a hole and died and never came back again, to this moment of where like I was like healing and suffering publicly because that was what I needed, you know? It was really crazy.
It is crazy. And did that help you break away from this label of being, quote, just a medical mom?
Yeah. It's funny. So when Henry was starting to like we saw that there was an end of that first admission. He's had several very scary admissions since, the last one being in 2023. But that first admission, when I was really like so novice, being like, okay, like I was scared to leave the hospital. I was scared not to have the support of nurses. When they're like, you can be discharged now. I was not ready because I was like, I can't do this on my own. I can't raise two other kids during COVID and have a medical fragile kid at home. I don't even know how to do these NG feeds. I don't know how to time a bolus feed. I don't know how to do his medication. Like those were the things going through my mind. Like I was scared. I became so comfortable in the embraces of the hospital floors that discharge actually felt almost like the scariest part because I was so supported with this network. My identity was like I would sleep bedside, but sometimes I went home, got showered, and I came back like it was a job, right? Because they were well supported. My kiddo was a baby. I couldn't breastfeed. There was nothing for me to do, right? So it was a really weird moment where I had to make a decision sort of in my personal brand, if you will, like my public like persona, but my private persona was like I was on talk therapy with a grief therapist who specialized in cancer like once a week, right? Like I was doing the work to like scream and yell in the hallways and have somebody be able to be empathetic who knew what to say to help me support those moments. And I had social workers on Sick Kids Hospital who were like there with me and the social workers advocate for you, right? And I remember feeling unsafe going home. And it was using those words, I feel unsafe, that unlocked for me a new dimension of support that I don't think people know are available then to me. Because, like, when you get a sick kid and you have a sick kid or a sick family member, you don't know, there's no manual for this. And it's not till you enter sort of the community of this, like, zebra, as they call it, community of people who have this altered condition that you realize there's this whole like set of languages you can use or tools that are resources available to you to give you respite, right? To give you comfort, to make your life easier, but you don't know about them. So I offer this word, I feel unsafe. And I say that to you now for your community to hear, because at any time you feel unsafe, they can't discharge you, right? They have to give you like what makes you unsafe. I can't do this at home. Okay, fine. Let's find some nursing for you. Oh, I get nursing at home. I didn't even know it was available to me. Oh, I can get what's called a PSL, a personal support worker. Or maybe it's called like a nurse practitioner that comes to your house and helps you with baths, helps you prepare food, like domestic work. Like I didn't know those things were available to me. I had no idea. I thought I'd have to go in blindly and have to do this all myself. So it was those sorts of moments and those transitions where I was like, okay, I'm a med mom, but I'm a lot of other things too. So it's one part of my identity, but being able to have some languages that sort of became available to me allowed me a much more smoother discharge and allowed me to have more of a safe plan going into this new chapter of my life, which was, holy shit, I'm now responsible for this child and his well-being and his life. That was a really hard moment. And it wasn't about my friendships at Sick Kids anymore. Like the nurses are doing their jobs and I'm seeing them as friends, right? So it was like a really weird transitional moment.
Yeah, but what I love about what you said is like saying the quiet part out loud. I think there's a lot of pressure on medical moms or even any caregiver that's been has spent so much time in the hospital that all you want to do is go home, right? You just want to go home and you want to live, but you're afraid to admit that there are very real challenges, both known and unknown, that you might cross in that moment. And being able to label that as, to your point, as unsafe, how
Right.
critical that is, like, internally, forget externally, just internally saying, like, it is okay not to feel like you have it all under control because, as you know, there's so much pressure on moms to have it all figured out or to at least give the appearance of having it all figured out. That part
Yeah.
to me is it's just so commendable that you could go there with yourself. And then I'm so curious. Have you
Yeah.
found in any ways that your ability to label that and to discern that in that moment has transcended at all into your business, into the way that you look at anything else? Is there any difference that you've seen since you've kind of gone through this moment in
Yeah.
the hospital with your son, with your identity as a medical mom that you now
Yeah.
see translating into your community?
Yeah. So I will say that we had a very scary episode, two scary episodes with Henry's life. Once he had like a blackout and had to basically stop breathing at home and had to call 911. And that was like much later in his life. So we're talking about the first like 9 months of our kiddo's life, right? That's like, we found out about the cardiac issue on his 4 months. He had his open heart surgery on his 6 month, were discharged on his 9 month. And then we find out about his condition. So a couple things happened. When we found out about his condition, we were devastated. We're like, okay, this isn't just a boo-boo, right? Most cardiac kids, you have like your heart is anatomically needs to be repaired. It's repaired and like you're okay, right? Once that repair happens, it's like you're living a full-time
Right.
normal life. There's no reason, there's no
There's like a
limitation.
before and after, right?
Right. This is like when you get a genetic disorder or genetic syndrome diagnosis, this is a lifelong prognosis with like unending, particularly terrible diagnosis, right? Like rare genetic disorder isn't like, oh, yay, this is like great. Usually it's like, this is terrible. It's life limiting. It's skill limiting. It means that your child will never be independent. It means that you will have, whatever it might be. So for me, that was the moment where I was like, I felt unsafe again, right? So I knew that I had to advocate for myself. And I think what is a hard thing for people who are not med moms to understand is once you have this like badge of med mom, you have to become also like an alpha mom, right? Like you need to advocate for your effing kid, right? And you need to advocate every step of the way. So I think for me, there was a level of unsafety in this new level of exhaustion of where I had to advocate so much harder and I had to learn so many new systems. And I had to learn, okay, my kid has missed every single developmental milestone because he was sitting healing from a sternum
That's hard.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, his heart. My kiddo had a paralyzed vocal cord as a result of his condition, and I was just, like, waiting for the day for that vocal cord to repair because I didn't wanna thicken his water because he can't drink. That's unsafe. Putting my kid in a bath is unsafe because he might drink unthickened water, right? So, new levels of unsafety, like, just sort of happen to be magnified across so many different elements of my life. So, living in a state of unsafe made me plan for exit strategies. I wanna say, like, a fire exit. Like, I was always looking for, like, how do I get out of this moment of feeling unsafe? And it did translate into me maybe feeling like I could take bigger risks in my business, in my life, because I was like, everything else in my life felt safer than the unsafety of, like, being the parent of this child. I don't know how to say that any other way, but that continues to be sort of the plan is, like, I feel safe in so many places in my life, parenting this one of my 4 children, and then actually being able I just had a baby 11 months ago, so, like bringing another child into this life who was such a safe kid, like, by every factor was also a risk, right? But I needed to grow my family, and I'll just say one remark here is, like, having an additional child after you've had a sick kid is also a very scary step, like, that was also doing as many genetic tests as possible. I did an amniocentesis to test for his condition. It was, like, very unlikely, but we had to do it because Henry's condition is de novo, meaning it's just, like, a random mutation, it's not genetic at all, like, not from our mom or dad genes, it's just de novo, it just happened. So yeah, that I think my whole life is living in this like gray zone of safety and unsafe. And the idea is just to have exit plans that make me feel safe. I know if that sounds crazy, but it's like a touch wood moment, right? Like where do you feel safe? It's like when you touch wood. Yeah, I hope that answered your question. I'm not sure if it
No, it
really did. I'm
does, and
sorry.
I think again, it's why I asked it because I think they're especially in the type of business that you have, they're the 2 are not separate, they're so integrated. Like, you have integrated your like, this life in a lot of ways, and I feel like what you're saying is almost like you can take more risks in your business because you know that the most important thing in your life,
Yeah.
like your son and Henry, like, that is the thing to protect, whereas this
Right.
business thing, like, what the hell do you have to lose relative to the thing that is actually the most critical and the most important role that you have as mom? And so I think it's like I don't know, I think that's very, very interesting.
I also think that 2 things, I'll just comment 2 things. Henry had a very big cardiac episode in 2023, in May of 2023, which almost killed him. So he almost died that day.
Hmm.
But he didn't die that day, and that was when I receded, like, I needed 6 months, I had post-traumatic stress disorder, he had a heart attack in front of me, required compressions, the whole 9 yards, and he was in critical care in the CCU cardiac unit when it happened, but he did flatline, it was 5:30 PM, I looked at the clock, I looked at him, I saw the flatline, they started doing compressions, these giant guys on my 11-kilogram baby, and we were already so many years away from his diagnosis, right? He was already 3, almost 3, and we went in for something that was supposed to be very minor that turned into something very major, and that's when I receded, and that's when I was, like, taking stock to be like, "Oh my god, I love my business," and I used to like, my business is my baby. Anyone who's an entrepreneur understands that, but I remember being like, "Okay, my children, and Henry specifically, are my most important people," and that's what I discovered this thing I called the dinner table test. I'm not sure, it's like something I made up, which is when Henry was in hospital during CCU, I would sit around the table with my 2 other kids, and Henry's chair was empty, And I was like, oh my God, this is not my family. Like, my family is so incomplete. And we weren't sure if Henry was actually going to, it was so touch and go for those May 2025. 2020 and 2021 was the diagnosis and the beginning of the trajectory. But this big, like, sort of, what's it called in music? The
Crescendo.
crescendo? The Cassandra, like, no, because whatever. Anyways, the peak of his sort of like medical experience happened 3 years later, where we thought he was really going to die, and that's when we were having conferences with palliative and hospice and end of life conversations. And to me, that was like I was dead. That was when I really fell into a hole, and I couldn't. My social media was over. I just like stopped posting for 6 months, and I remember going through a lot of different therapies because of this traumatic experience. And for me, it was this looping thing that I kept seeing anytime I closed my eyes of his flatlining and the compressions and the clock, me locking eyes with the male nurse doing it. His name was Kevin, and me saying, Kevin, what do you do? Kevin kept like saying that. And then me screaming so loud that they had to say to me, you have to go in the hallway. So I was now a screaming mom in the hallway. Like, that was me. And they're like, they need to do good CPR. And if they don't do good CPR, like, there could be repercussions, so they need to focus, you need to stop screaming. That's what I was told. And then they came out to me, they're like, "Okay, he had really long CPR, it was 11 minutes, but it was really good CPR." And, like, what? Like, I couldn't even, like, fathom what had happened. So to me, in that storyline is when I disappeared off planet Earth. I had to go on medication, I could not come back, and it took me 6 months before I was like, "Okay, my children are my priority. My work, anyone else could do. Nobody can be who I am for my kids or my spouse." And it was shortly after that episode in 2025, I had, like, a big healing experience, and I realized I wanted to grow my family. And my baby, and I'll say this very publicly, I love him. He's my 4th child. We have 4 kids right now. I don't know Henry's life expectancy. I have no idea if I'm gonna have to bury my child, which is a very hard thing to say and not the natural order of life. But my dinner table test is like my family is not complete with the family of 2 children. So Henry, even though he's my golden boy and he's so special and he's amazing, if God forbid anything ever happened to him, I have this insurance child, which I call him. He's my insurance policy child, which is I have 3 kids sitting around the table. So I love my children, all of them very differently. They've all shown me such different parts of who I am. But this most recent iteration is that, like, life is crazy, man. And you have no idea what you're going to be served up. And you have no idea how strong you are until you have no choice, literally no choice, but to be the strength in those moments. So that to me is really the summation of where it went and where it had gone and where it's going. And, Henry is very complicated, and our life is very complicated. And people look at me and they're like, I don't know how you do it. We give our kids syringes through his NG tube. I mean, through his G tube now. He goes on a special needs school. He uses an iPad to communicate. He's extremely small stature. If he has a cough or a sneeze, we think he's going to be admitted, right? So, like, that's my life and that's what I think about. I don't ever think about those things. But when other people hear me talk about those things, they can't believe that that's my life. And
Right.
I'll add that when I see parents whose kids are in a wheelchair, completely disabled, who have no quality of life, or who are using eye gaze for communication, who are totally paralyzed, or, I look at them being like, I don't know how they live, right? So it's very interesting to see this sort of cycle of motherhood and, like, the ecosystem of motherhood and how we view one another. And to me, like, med moms have a special, unique bond, and we live a very specific type of life that you cannot even articulate or even peek in, right? And I think that's what happens with social media. And that's why people were so interested in my story with Henry when I was posting so actively about him, is that with the advent of social media and especially with TikTok, like, people get, like, to peek, right? They get to, like, behind the kimono a bit, which is the expression. They get to look behind Oz and see a bit, like, what is happening in this person's life. And what might be, like, the mundane thing that I do might be, like, super riveting to you because it's so different from your life.
Right.
So in that way, I'm sort of, like, happy to have had social media in my corner to be able to share Henry's story publicly. And also, like, a lot of people walk around this world with Myhre syndrome. There's only 200 people in the world with the condition diagnosed. so he's 1 in 37 million. There's got to be
Mm.
other people with this condition who have no idea that they even have it, right? And it's a very, very large spectrum of people who have this condition. But Henry has like all of it in terms of the spectrum of disorder. Maybe let's say like, you go to Starbucks and you order like a non-fat latte with extra foam. Henry is non-fat latte, extra foam, double hot. Like he has all of the things, which is really, really hard. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like, it's a very unique journey. As you said, nobody signs up for this. But to some degree, having Henry in my life has been the ultimate blessing because it's given me such a different perspective on how to show up in this world in every facet of my life.
What are the hopes that you have for yourself? Knowing that that Henry's life is so unpredictable. Like I'm just curious, like how do you're such an ambitious person. I can see so easily how you've been successful in growing a community because you're so relatable, so charismatic. And it's so obvious to me that you're destined for such greatness. And at the same time, how do you balance like setting goals and being ambitious when you know that life is truly so unpredictable?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think I actually like reset my goals every single year and I don't do it like on New Year's Eve or anything. I'm just like, I'm always giving myself permission to reinvent, right? Because my top line is being unequivocally available at the drop of a hat for my children, especially Henry. The school could call right now and I'd have to go right now and get him, right? Or my life might completely come to a halt tomorrow. So the concentric circles in which I try to manage is one in which I could give like a master class on this topic because I feel so passionate about it, where like I plan, right? But like the big guy laughs, right? I can make all the plans I want, but I have no idea what's in store for me. And I'm okay with that, right? I've had to learn to
Right.
give up control and I've had to like sort of learn to have fun like every single day, right? Like really to live every day like it's our last because it could be, right? That's a very interesting aha moment that most people don't get to experience. So, I also think sometimes the things that break you when you're put back together, you're just a better version of yourself. And this was a moment where I have been broken, right? And I had to reorganize the facets of my head, my heart, my soul, my spirituality. So my identity is there, right? It's a big part of my story, but it's not my entire story. And that's what I'll offer.
What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I've gotten into fashion recently, which is a new one for me. I was somebody who used to leave the house like in Lululemons, like sweatpants, and never like put an ounce of effort into my looks. And I have just started to like do my hair, put on makeup, take a 10 minutes to put together an outfit. So that's been fun for me is like being a fashion girly, which I never thought I was going to be. I never thought it was something that was available to me. But I think for me, honestly, like I was really tired this morning. I have 4 kids. I was up with the baby and like getting to the gym was a huge priority for me. Just moving my body is a big priority for me. And also just like showing up with
Yeah.
presence, right? Like doesn't matter if I'm getting into an Uber, if I'm coming to my office where I am now, this beautiful space in Toronto. But like to me, just showing up is really fun. What else do I do for fun? I read audiobooks, like I listen to books on tape, which is fun. I socialize with my girlfriends. We go out and have walks, lunch, whatever it is. My fun for me is also really interesting because like I like to play board games with my kids. They're at that age where like they love board games, they love cards. We watch some TV together with my children, which I like. My husband and I are big foodies. We like to eat in restaurants and stuff. So that's like the ecosystem of the things that happen beyond me. I really love helping women make money because I'm a business coach. So like I love entrepreneurship, any opportunity to help somebody, even in a bathroom, if somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm like thinking about starting a cafe. I'm like, oh, let's talk about it, right? It's my favorite thing in the world. And we do like travel. Travel's really complicated for kiddos with special needs.
Sure.
A lot of my people in my community whose kiddos are very disabled or they as families can't travel or they don't travel. So if you have respite or hospice available to you, if you can make it work, buy the insurance, go on the trip. Like well, I just got back from 10 days with my kiddo from a cruise and he's really complicated, but we did the thing. Yeah. And I think for me, living fun means like just really showing up even on the worst days and being like, let's make today great any way it could be, right? Like how can we turn the
Right.
ship around is a good analogy.
Right.
So I offer that to you. Any way where you can find joy for yourself and really pour into yourself. Like if you're a woman who's had trauma, is suffering, you need to look at alternative therapies, if whether that's, you know, taking a weekend to just run away. Like do whatever you need to do to make yourself feel good. That's my advice.
I think one of the things, though, I want our listeners to take away from this is I could easily listen to this episode as someone that's earlier in their medical mama journey and say, oh, I want to get to that side. I want to be there. And what you've shared is that getting there has required all of the ups and downs, all of the breaks, all of the like shutdowns. Like you've done the things. Like I think that sometimes people are so in a rush to get to the other side that they don't realize that the only way to get to the other side is just to go through it and to really listen to yourself about when it's time just to completely turn it off and then kind of to gradually find your way back. And I think it again in this respect, like it is such inspiration to see that you just got back from vacation with all 4 kids and that you know you're able to kind of find both joys that you had before, but new joys in the ways that you're pouring in and investing into your own image and through fashion. Like that's such a healthy thing, but to not
Mm.
rush to get there because unfortunately for everyone, not just a mom with a medical mom, is that life is going to throw things at you that you just don't know. I do want to just wrap up. There's so many takeaways. I've written down 3 things that I don't think I've ever heard on the podcast before, but there are three words and phrases I think are so important. One is the word unsafe. I think that's a word that we can all use and be more mindful of. 2 is the alpha mom. Love that. I love that. I think that's such a important term for medical moms to realize is that you have to go over. You have to do everything more and it just weighs on you. And of course the dinner table test.
Yeah.
I think that's just a really easy visualization for anyone to do as they're trying to think of future planning for their families. I do want to give you an opportunity to tell everyone where they can find you, where they can learn more, where
Sure.
they can potentially invest more into themselves through you. If you don't mind sharing all of that information.
Yeah, Jordan, thank you. That's such a good summation. And those are some of my Alana-isms. Like those are my quips I say all the time. So it's part of my vernacular, which is so funny that you highlighted them and underscored them because
They're
those are things
so good. I can't wait to
I
use
really
them.
refer to them often. Yeah, please do. Yeah,
I'll
I think,
trademark you. Don't like, I'll give you
yeah, don't
credit, but
worry.
they're
No,
so
I
good.
love that. I give credit where credit is due. That's my thing. No, that's why I'm talking about Glennon Doyle today because, like, I'm really inspired by her, and I know I'm late to dinner on that one, but yeah, I think thank you so much. If you wanna find me on Instagram, I'm at Mom Halo, like Beyoncé's Halo, this Halo, MOMHALO. That's been the name of my community for years. I am based in Toronto, but I do virtual coaching. I have, like, small groups, one-on-one. If you're thinking about starting a business, if you're a med mom and you saw, like, a problem that you wanna solve, lots of people come up with services and products based on, like, they see a hole in the marketplace. So if you're percolating an idea and you want to flesh it out, I'm happy to discuss it. If you're much further along on your business journey, you are an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter if you're brick and mortar or service based, and you want to think about maybe turning yourself into a personal brand. Because really now, today, we know it's about becoming a person of influence, not becoming an influencer. And if you're an expert in your subject area and you want to get your name out there, your brand out there, if you've been in business for 10 years and you need a fresh set of eyes, I'm your girl. And if you just want to like have a conversation, I'm always down for a free 15-minute discovery call. My podcast is called The Mom Halo Show with your host, Alana Kavitz, myself. If you like this vibe, you'll love my podcast. I truly love having conversations with interesting people who have masterful stories to tell and masterful storytellers. So yeah, drop me a line. I'd love to know you. And I'm so honored to be part of this community and Jordan for giving me the opportunity to share my story today. Thank you so much.
Of course, I look forward to more conversations, and I'm quite confident that you will see quite a bit of referrals from this because I know that there are so many people that I talk to that have ambitions and desires that go far beyond their role as mom. So thank you for being that inspiration for them and for me too. So talk to you soon.
Thank you.